diamond shaped fossa. The boundaries, as you all know, are the biceps femoris, semitendinosus, semimembranosus. Then, okay, I will use the pointer itself. Biceps femoris, semitendinosus, semimembranosus, and then medial head of the gastrocnemius and the lateral head of gastrocnemius along with the plantaris. Plantaris minded, this is a question which is asked even in the MCQs as well as the Vivas, that it is the muscle with the longest tendon in the body. I will be showing that in the subsequent slides. So we take this image. These images I have taken from the Macmillan's Atlas, you all might be aware of. So in case if you have any structure related query or anything, you can get back to those books to get a better clear picture. The atlases which you might be referring to are actually giving so many other labels as well, which are not required at your level. So primarily to focus upon which labels, I have written only those in the all the sides, and I have made things simpler by highlighting some stuff also. And firstly, I was planning to write them simultaneously, but I got to know that there has been some connectivity issues in the past, so I did not opt for that. I have already labeled the images. So in this image, you can clearly see the section has been taken from this part. Okay, so this is the biceps femoris. The things which I have mentioned, you have to identify in your exam because these are the basic stuff you need to know. And making a blunder in these basic musculatures in the real cadaver will not fetch you marks anyhow. So this is the biceps femoris, and then this is the gastrocnemius muscle. Gastrocnemius having its medial head and then the lateral head, and then the muscle semitendinosus and the semitendinosus is going this. I'm just tracing it out. You can easily see it's visible, I think so. Okay, and then we have the same membranosus which is here as well as here. You will get a better picture in the three-dimensional view which I will be showing even. So this is just a superficial dissection, and I have highlighted the part with the yellow, which is a diamond shaped fossa. You can get an estimate like this. Okay, so moving on to this now, as you already know the contents, but the things I have just written in a simplified manner, and I have highlighted the things which you need to know for sure. The question which is often asked to you in the exams is this one: which are the structures most deep and which are most superficial in the sequence basically. So the deepest structure, moving from deep to superficial, the first structure we're talking about is the popliteal artery and its branches, then the popliteal vein and its tributaries, then the sciatic nerve, which divides into common peroneal nerve and tibial nerve, which you already know. Regarding its division, it's actually highly variable. The division of sciatic nerve can be anywhere just around, just let me show you this image. It can be, okay, I will show you the list. So in this you can see the common peroneal nerve. This is the division. This is the tibial nerve and this is the common peroneal nerve. So this division can occur anywhere here, or maybe a little above, or maybe mid thigh. There has been variations regarding this. Then moving on, then there is a posterior cutaneous nerve of thigh. You do not bother much, but if you can just label them, or you can just tell them in the exam, it's good. And obviously there will be some popliteal lymph nodes and popliteal fat as well, but these structures which I have highlighted in green, they are the most important. You have to answer and make a note of them to identify them whenever you get a chance. Now the question which is asked is, it was recently asked in the AIMS entrance exam as well, and in various MCQs you can check the books. It is given that the popliteal artery pulsation is difficult to feel. The reason is asked. The reason is basically, see, there are two basic reasons. It is, as you know, as you saw, it is the deepest content of the popliteal fossa, and it is not present against any bony prominence. So that's the thing I want to emphasize about the popliteal artery pulsation. Moving on, now I will just be showing these contents which I have discussed. The tibial nerve, which I already told you, and common peroneal nerve. You can see this dividing, okay, and this is the common peroneal nerve or the fibular nerve. And then we have the main content, the popliteal artery. See, it's you can see a little bit shadow. This is a image, relatively a superficial dissection image. So you can see the popliteal artery behind here, and a little part you can see of popliteal vein. And some muscle which some examiners do ask, gracilis, to identify the gracilis. You can see in this view, this is the gracilis. Okay, so now moving on, sural nerve. Sometimes examiners do ask if you can locate the sural nerve. In some sections which we have, I will be also showing you the sections simultaneously which we have in our department for exam purposes. So in some sections, almost the structures which I have mentioned, these are easily visible, no doubt, and few structures may or may not be visible. So at least if you have made sure that you have identified the basic structures, you will gain a good confidence in the exam as well, and you can proceed your viva in a proper way. So if you can identify the sural nerve and it's clearly visible, you can correlate. So you can find in this superficial dissection relatively here, this is sural nerve. Okay, I'm not going into the details regarding the muscle, the nerves, and the blood supply detail. You have already covered the theory part. I'm just here to show these things on a cadaveric images. In this image, okay, in this image, the heads of the gastrocnemius have been separated to show the deeper structure. So you might be wondering that what structure we have removed. So it's the head of the gastrocnemius which we have written. Moving on to a deeper dissection. Here we have, you can see we have cut the semitendinosus, tendon, the muscle, the semimembranosus, you can see, and here we can visualize the erector magnus also. See, it's labeled. So now, as you saw in the previous slides, we discussed about the plantaris muscle. So plantaris muscle, if you can identify in a given section, that will be great. So this here is the plantaris muscle which is labeled, and now this muscle is giving off its tendency. This, if you can visualize this tendon, this tendon I have labeled this as well. Okay, this is the plantaris tendon, and here you can see the muscles have been reflected, this one, this one. So now we can see also the other muscle, this is soleus. We will be moving forward to the leg region, then we will discuss more eventually create. Okay, so and for the descriptive purposes, I have also labeled the medial and lateral side, which you need to mention in all of your schematic diagrams, which is a common error in all the, mostly I can see the students blunder, maybe they forget or something. You have to draw the axis, anterior, posterior, superior, inferior, medial, lateral. That has to be done for sure, because that will give a good sense to the examiner that yes, you have understood the diagram well, and you are not just mugging up the diagrams and just drawing the schema. Moving on to progressive dissection. So we have cut the biceps femoris also here, and now you can see clearly, this is the structure which I want to emphasize in this slide. This is the popliteal artery. This is the popliteal artery. If you are able to identify the popliteal artery, that is basic thing, and branches and all, if you can just enumerate at that time, that will also be great. And then again, you can see the gracilis muscle here. Popliteus muscle. This is the popliteus muscle. You can see, okay, this whole part. And now something which I want to focus here, as we see in the previous slide, we saw the soleus muscle. You can see this was soleus muscle. Now we have cut the soleus. You can see we have reflected the soleus. Now something interesting and important. This popliteal artery, as you already know, it's dividing into anterior tibial and the posterior tibial. So you can see the division here clearly. This is sometimes often asked in the exam, if you can identify at what level you can. So when you will see it, you will remember it more. I would suggest you to go through again and again these images via Macmillan Atlas, so that you have a picture memory of these images, because no one can remember them in a one day, that's for sure. In during my MBBS as well, I used to recapitulate whenever I used to not feel like studying. I used to just open the atlas and randomly open these images and all. I could just, for you can develop interest by just getting on to the labels which you already know by heart, and then you can eventually go on to further labels if you are interested. That will help you to remember some basic things, and also it will help inculcate a good interest in the schematic diagrams which are given in your. So now this we are starting with the leg now. So I have made a flow chart. This is my own handwriting. I have made for your own easy things. So you can either take a screenshot right now, so that you can save time by not writing it simultaneously, or it's up to you. So we see now there is the part which we're discussing is the legs. So previously, as you might have seen, in thigh we had three compartments: anterior compartment, medial compartment, and the posterior compartment. There was no lateral compartment. Okay, so now this is the difference in the leg. We have the anterior compartment, we have the lateral compartment, and we have the posterior compartment. We do not have the medial compartment of leg, which is very important, and you must never ever confuse this while giving your answers in the viva. Now, as a general rule, all the muscles of the anterior compartment are acting as a dorsiflexors, and these names you are probably by now you're aware of already. So I have not wasted time in writing all the full things. You can just have your notes with the proper full names of all the muscles, so that it can help you in your last revisions. The muscles comprising the anterior compartment of leg, they are the extensor hallucis longus, extensor digitorum longus, and peroneus tertius tibialis anterior, which is highlighted here. You can see this is the inverter. This acts as the inverter. This is often asked in the MCQ. This is an MCQ question here. And this is also an MCQ question which I have highlighted. This yellow color which I have highlighted. So these are the two MCQs. famous. Okay, so now the next, just we are just dealing right now with the basic plan so that eventually you can understand better. The next is the lateral compartment, which comprises of the aortas, comprising of the peroneus longus, peroneus brevis. Then we have the posterior compartment. Posterior compartment is basically comprising of the plantar flexors, and which can be divided into two groups: the superficial muscle group and the deep muscle group. There is something interesting about this group of muscles. The superficial group of muscles, they are inserting into the calcaneum, and these deep muscles of the group are having its they go all the way along to the foot, and so we can say they have an extensive insertion directly to the foot. So enumerating the superficial muscles, one is the gastrocnemius, soleus, and the plantaris. Now something again of clinical relevance and also asked in some MCQs, and some externals also asked this question, that this gastrocnemius, two heads, medial head and lateral head, and the soleus, these three basically, they are comprising and forming the they are also called as together known as the triceps surae. Triceps surae. I've written this. You can write down the spellings as well, and also known as the triceps of the calf. So this is something interesting, and you must know this. Then we move on to the deep muscles. The deep muscles, the flexor hallucis longus, flexor litorum longus, tibialis posterior, which also is acting as the inverter. I have specifically highlighted and I have mentioned this previously. Now, some point which you should know: the posterior superficial compartment of leg, the posterior compartment, this posterior compartment, the superficial muscles, this part we are talking about, this part is devoid of the neurovascular bundle. This was recently asked in AIMS exams also, and this is sometimes asked by some, that it is devoid of the neurovascular bundle. So when on dissection you see this posterior superficial compartment of leg, you won't be finding any neurovascular bundle, but there will be something which you will be finding. I will just show you in the subsequent image. So you can make out that very important structure by this fact, if you remember this fact. So this is devoid of the neurovascular bundle inside the compartment, and the nerves and vessels which are supplying this compartment are actually situated outside the deep fascia which is covering this muscle. Okay, so as you saw, we divided the muscles on the basis of anterior compartment, lateral compartment, and posterior compartment. So now we can also divide them on the basis of action on dorsiflexion, plantar flexion, inversion, and eversion. You can go through these. I will not be wasting time because I will be running short in time. I have so many images to show. You can go through this also. Now, moving on to the leg. Now, firstly, we are talking about the leg from the posterior view. This is the posterior. You can see the image. This is the posterior view which we have, right? So, in the posterior compartment of leg, as we already saw, there were two group of superficial group of muscles and deep muscles. Okay, so some things which you can see very easily on the real cadaver. So those things I have labeled, and if you can identify other structures is good for you, but these all things are must know. You can go ahead with so many things otherwise. And one more interesting fact which I have written in the corner: all are superficial muscles, this gastrocnemius and plantaris and soleus. But what is the difference between the two? Some interesting fact: the gastrocnemius and the plantaris, they are originating from the condyles of the femur, and soleus is originating from the soleal line, which is on the posterior aspect of tibia. You can remember the osteology part. So this is, and this is something of the difference between the two, but they both are both this part and this part, they all are the superficial muscles only. So as you can relatively see in this image, this is just a superficial dissection, just the skin, superficial fascia, all those things have been taken off. So first thing which you can notice is a small saphenous vein which is going all through this, tracing it with the marker highlighter. Sorry, this is the small saphenous vein. I have labeled it below as well. You can see. Okay, and we have the tendo Achilles, or the tendo calcaneus, or the Achilles tendon as well, which will be more clear in the subsequent images. Now, here, mind it, you have to definitely mention and remember which is the medial side. So this is the gastrocnemius muscle having its medial head and the lateral head, which is to be identified at the superficial level. Now, if we reflect this gastrocnemius muscle, so you can see we have proceeded to a deeper dissection now. Here you can see the important structures. First I will be talking about the popliteal artery, the popliteal vein, the tibial nerve, the common peroneal or the fibular nerve, the plantaris muscle, the soleus muscle. These all things, as you know, we have discussed in the popliteal fossa as well. So now here you can see the tibial nerve which is going. You can see this is the tibial nerve. I can just trace it. This is the tibial nerve. Okay, this is tibial nerve. You can see, and this was soleus muscle which has been cut to show this deeper dissection. Here, something of great importance which I told you previously as well: tendon of plantaris. So this tendon, you can see. I don't know if this is having some problem in the brightness or not in your viewpoint, but this is the tendon which is visible here. So this is between the gastrocnemius and the soleus on dissection you will be seeing, and we mentioned previously also that though no neurovascular bundle is present, so we do not have to confuse this tendon with the nerve, which is the major confusion you have while seeing the structures on cadaver. Then this is again the small surface vein and then sural nerve. Okay. The rest of the things you can get clear by seeing the atlas again and again. You will remember these structures easy. So again, we are talking about, if you can notice, there are some structures which are common in all the diagrams, and I have labeled again and again so that inadvertently you remember them by the end of the class. You will have a picture memory of these things. Gastrocnemius, the plantaris muscle, the fibular artery. Then I've shown the tibia and the fibula. This is also visible. Some posterior surface is visible. Then there is something. If we move on to the deeper aspect, we have the flexor hallucis longus and the flexor itorum longus. Tibial nerve. You can identify the tibial nerve, which is relatively easy. If you can see, this is a tibial nerve going all through. Okay, this is easily identifiable on real-time cadaver. And this is the posterior tibia. Let's have this just a quick recap of this in a three-dimensional view. We talked about the posterior view of the leg. Just for recapitulation, femur is cut, medial epicondyle, lateral epicondyle, superficial muscles of the posterior compartment of leg, which are comprising of the medial head of the gastrocnemius, lateral head of the gastrocnemius, plantaris, the soleus muscle, and the calcaneal tendon also you can see on this view, and then the calcaneus bone. Posterior leg deeper structures. This is superficial muscles of the which are cut. Okay, gastrocnemius is cut, plantaris, soleus, calcaneal tendon, which I have already discussed. Deeper muscles. Moving on to the deeper muscles. This is the popliteus muscle. If you can identify on this given section in the exam, it's good. Then we have the flexor digitorum longus, tibialis posterior, flexor hallucis longus. Okay, we continue now. We have discussed these two things. Okay, these images have been correlated as well here. So you can see in this image, which you could see previously also, I have labeled this is the tibialis posterior, FDL, and you can see this. You can recapitulate again and again. You will see them. You will remember easily. It's not an issue. This is the image from the department's like soft parts. So some parts is because see in a 2D image from the cadaver, it's very difficult to correlate. But yes, I have made my effort to label them and to take the images properly, clearly, so that you don't have any problem, because luckily this topic is having all these things which are relatively simple, so you can understand easily. So you can see the gastrocnemius muscle, lateral head and the medial heads, okay, which is relatively little bit if you rotate the image here. And then we have the soleus, we discussed Achilles tendon, which is clearly visible. Then moving on to the leg, anterior view, anterior compartment, muscles of the anterior leg, superficial. As you already know, there were dorsiflexors in the anterior compartment. So there was extensor hallucis longus, which I will just go through the by the list which I mentioned initially first, and then I will discuss the remaining structures. Extensor hallucis longus, extensor digitorum longus. Then we have the tibialis anterior and fibularis tertius. This is comprising of the anterior compartment of the leg. These are the muscles. And here as well you can see the anterior tibial crest, tibial tuberosity, patellar tendon, which you can just have a quick recap. Okay. Moving on to the anterior compartment deeper structures. Interosseous membrane, anterior tibial artery, extensor hallucis longus, tibialis anterior has been cut here. The extensor digitorum longus has been again cut. Then fibularis tertius, already shown, superior extensor retinaculum and inferior extensor retinaculum, which will be again and again showing you in the coming images of the related to the foot and ankle. Okay, this part we have. Okay, in this image you can see relatively tibialis anterior, extensor hallucis longus, and the other image for the other things you have to relatively rotate, pan and zoom, which is the limitation of this part. Talking about something important here regarding the anterior view itself, the structures which I have labeled are like quite important, because these structures are often asked. I have labeled them medial to lateral. So firstly you can see extensor digitorum brevis. This is extensor digitorum brevis. Okay, then tibialis anterior, extensor hallucis longus. Then this whole bundle, this is having the anterior tibial artery and the deep peroneal. Okay, so out of these two, you can see, if you can see clearly, I don't know, this is the artery if you can see, and this is the nerve if you can see clearly out of this bundle. Okay, then we have the extensor digitorum longus tendon, and then the peroneus tertius tendon. You can remember these structures from medial to lateral with the mnemonic, which you might be already aware of. the THANDP. The Himalayas are not dry places. You can also remember in a funny way, this is Thand and this is P. So in the fellows which are Punjabi, they might be aware of Thand Pena. So Thand and P. So Thand Pena. You can remember by that if you can remember in the here. You minded the extensor retinaculum has been removed. Talking about the lateral view of the leg. So laterally in the lateral compartment we had the peroneus longus and the peroneus brevis. If you can recapitulate. Okay, so we can see in this image the head of the fibula, the lateral compartment of the leg is comprising of the fibularis longus and the fibularis brevis. I will talk about this structure again. This is something important to be told. I will tell you in the later image. Then we have the lateral malleolus, fibularis brevis tendon again, and in the base of the fifth metacarpal, fibularis longus tendon again, and calcaneal tendon, which had already been discussed. Now moving on to the ankle and the foot, there are some structures here which are very important for you to identify. We have certain cadaveric images with us in the department, or the soft parts, projected parts, which relatively show a clear picture of all these things. I have projected those images also in the later subsequent slides. Here you can notice the subcutaneous area of the fibula. Then we have the extensor retinaculum, which is very easily identifiable in any of the images. Extensor retinaculum, which is the superior and the inferior extensor retinaculum. Then we have the extensor digitorum. Extensor digitorum. See, this is the brevis, and this part is the brevis. This part is the brevis. You can see labeled, and this is the longus. This is longus. It has been already marked. You can read the legends in the images as well relatively later on, so that you can get a more clarity. And for the descriptive purposes, also labeled here the dorsal distal expansion. Then we have the peroneus, the three parts: the longus, the brevis, and the tertius. You can see this is the longus, the brevis, and the tertius. You can go through all these images again and again by the Macbin atlas. Then we have something, the other retinaculum, which is the peroneal or the fibular retinaculum, which is again superior, and then there is inferior part. I have labeled with the red color so that you don't confuse in the two labels. Then we have the peroneus brevis and the longus. You can see clearly this is the longus. We're talking about this longus and this is the brevis. This was the lateral side, that lateral view. Now we have the ankle and foot from the medial. So here we can see the flexor retinaculum, which I have labeled here. Again, there are some structures, arrangement of some structures from medial to lateral, again, which has to be remembered, and it's often asked in the exam. The first one is the tibialis posterior tendon, then the flexor digitorum longus tendon, the posterior tibial artery, the tibial nerve, and the flexor hallucis longus tendon. If we highlighted these letters of all these, so it can be remembered by the mnemonic Tom, Dick, and Harry, T, D, A, N, and H. Okay, then we can see here the medial surface of the tibia, and the medial malleolus, the tibialis anterior, extensor hallucis longus. You can also go through the legend. Then a similar image, but something here to be shown. See, the tendons of the peroneus tertius, and this is peroneus tertius. This peroneus tertius. Talking about this tendons of the peroneus tertius and the extensor digitorum longus. As you can relatively see, this one and this one, they lie superficial to the extensor digitorum brevis, which has been labeled in this diagram. You can see this relation here. You can see this part. Focus on this part. You can see the relation here. 1, 2, and 3. Three structures. You can see the relation. It has already been mentioned in the legend. So talking about the peroneus, I have labeled them together so that you can remember them. Brevis, longus, and tertius. Peroneus. Okay. Then we have the small saphenous vein and the swollen nerve. Then lateral malleolus, you can see, and the peroneus fibularis again, longus and brevis again, for tracing them down below. This thing again, which I discussed previously regarding the mnemonic Tom, Dick, and Harry, you can see this clearly here also. The mnemonic Tom, Dick, and Harry: tibialis posterior, flexor digitorum longus. Everyone is showing the description differently, but you can remember the one which I projected on the previous slides. Then flexor hallucis longus. Then the same things: calcaneal tendon, fibularis longus, fibularis brevis, and this is the image taken from the cadaver, like prosected part which we have in a department. This is some things are easily identifiable, but which are on the image, it is easily to a note. But some things are better visual, like when you get a hands-on experience with the cadaver. So we can see the clearly tibialis anterior muscle, then the extensor digitorum long, then the extensor retinaculum, which I already mentioned, easily visible without any problem. Superior and inferior. Then we have the extensor hallucis longus tendon, which is easily identifiable again. Going to the great toe, we can easily identify. Then talking about this thing which I previously mentioned, this is the fibularis longus and the brevis. See, you can see this. It is going. Let me just follow this. This is going. You can see if you can follow through. This is going. Okay. So you can read the legend here. The common tendinous sheath, that is the common synovial sheath of fibular muscle, covers the tendons of both the fibularis longus and the brevis muscles as they travel deep to both the superior and the inferior fibular retinaculum. The superior and the inferior retinaculum, which we discussed in the previous slides, if you can recall, along the lateral aspect of the ankle. Then moving on to the dorsum of the foot, some things which are easily visible on this 2D image: distal arteries, then the extensor digitorum muscle with its brevis and longus. You can identify them. You can follow the arrows. Then we have 1, 2, 3, 4 labeled dorsal introstia. I'm talking about these eventually again. 1, 2, 3, and 4. You can go through the Macmillan image if it's not clear on your screens. And we have the peroneus tertius. You can see this peroneus tertius. Okay. Then something of great clinical relevance, which you will be going through again and again in your clinical postings, the dorsalis pedis artery. Extremely important because its pulsations are often checked, and this is a part of a final. So dorsalis pedis artery. Then we have the tibialis anterior. You can see the tibialis anterior. Then we have the extensor hallucis longus and brevis. The brevis is being followed below. You can see this brevis. This is the brevis. Okay. Talking about the dorsal introstia, there are 4 dorsal introstia, bipinnate, and the first and the fifth digit are not having, so I crossed them. Okay, D1, D2, D3, and D4, the dorsal introstia. So, something which you might be already aware of in the foot, where we have there is the axis digit, which you might be aware of from the upper limb as well. So here the axis digit is the second digit. So you can see the D1 and D2 are being attached on this. So if you can recall from upper limb, the pad and tab told about the plantars, adductors, and dorsal adductors, dorsal introstia as the adductors. So this you have to correlate with the upper limb as well, because when the exam will be there, so you have to remember everything as a whole. Some labels on the real image from the department itself, the superior and the inferior extensor retinaculum already discussed. Then you can also see the extensor digitorum brevis and the extensor hallucis brevis muscle here. You can see this. Okay. And then we have the extensor hallucis longus. This is separately visible, easily identifiable on the real cadaver. Then we have the extensor digitorum longus. See, this is beginning from here and then beneath, going then beneath, and then you can see, you can follow through. Okay, we move on to the same thing. Dorsum, you can see tibia has been cut. Tibialis anterior tendon, the extensor hallucis longus, extensor digitorum longus cut, and the fibularis tertius, fibula is also cut here. Then the extensor hallucis brevis, extensor digitorum brevis. Then this has already been shown previously, and extensor digitorum longus tendon. Now moving on to the last part, sole. Sole of the foot. You already have been given the lecture for this topic. So I'll be just quickly recapitulating. You can take these notes. You can make notes from these. I've just enumerated all these things for easy understanding. Firstly, just talking briefly about this. As you know, the tibial nerve. This tibial nerve is the main nerve supplying the posterior compartment of the leg. So underneath the flexor retinaculum, it's divided into the medial plantar nerve and the lateral. This, out of these two, the lateral plantar nerve is the dominant nerve of the foot. This is something which we have noticed, that it supplies all the adductors, the introstia, and all the bipinnate. This is also holds true in the upper limb as well, wherein the dominant nerve is again supplying the all the adductors, introstia, and bipinnate. You can cross check with the upper limb as well. It will help you to give a better understanding of the top. So now moving, and this dominance is not that that medial plantar nerve will not supply. It's not like that. It's that that this is the dominant nerve. So you can see this eventually in the layers of the foot, first layer, second layer, third layer, fourth layer, that eventually you can see the dominance will increase. I will be talking about this. So talking about the first layer first. The first layer is comprising of the 2 abductors and 1 flexor. The 2 abductors and the 1 flex. The first is the abductor hallucis, abductor digita minimi, and flexor digitorum brevis. Then in the second layer, we have 2 tendons and 2 muscles. The 2 tendons are the flexor hallucis longus and the flexor digitorum longus. Then and mind it, if you can notice, I have mentioned so that you can not confuse with the digiti, because the words, maybe you have gone through all the text, it's well. If you have not read the old name properly, you will be confusing with the muscles name digiti and digitorum. So you should know where the words are coming, and you should not confuse between them while writing the FDN and any. So this is the flexor digitorum longus and the flexor digitorum accessorius, which is also known as the quadratus plantae, other name for this muscle. And then we have the four lumbricals, the first, second, third, fourth. Out of this, the first one is unipinnate, and the second, third, and fourth is the bipinnate. Now, just okay. First, we complete this. Then we have the third layer, which comprises of two flexors and one adductor. The flexor hallucis brevis, the flexor digiti minimi, the adductor hallucis. So two flexors and one adductor. Then we have introitiae, 7 introitiae, 4 dorsal introitiae, and 3 plantar introitiae. Out of which these the 4 are bipinnate and 3 are unipinnate. Talking about the nerve supply, as you can see, the dominance of this LP and the lateral plantar nerve is increasing. If you can see, I've highlighted with the different colors as well. Out of these 3, only 1 is being supplied by LPN, and the rest 2 are supplied by the medial plantar. And now, in the second layer, 2 things: the bipinnate group of the lumbricals and the flexor digitorum accessorius. We are not concerned about the tendons here because they are coming from above. So we are talking only about these. You can see now, out of 3, there are 2 things which are being supplied by lateral and 1 by medial plantar. Then we have these 2 being supplied by the lateral plantar nerve and the medial plantar. And then finally we have all the introitiae being supplied by the lateral plantar. In sole of foot, for viva purposes or anything, the basics things which you need to remember is the layers and the muscles comprising these layers, and then the nerve supply. If you do not go into so much details about the origin, the insertions of each of, because this is not right now required. You can just remember, that's good to know stuff. But this is something which I have written here in the slides, which you need to know for sure. Moving on to the sole of foot. First, let's go through the other images. So the most superficial dissection from the sole of foot. Firstly, we will see the plantar aponeurosis, which is easily visible, and you need to identify if there is spotting or something, so you can identify the structures, be it plantar aponeurosis or any other structures which are clearly visible in the given soft part. Then moving on to a deeper layer. Now we have this is the first layer. After we have removed the plantar aponeurosis, you can see the plantar aponeurosis has been cut here. So the first layer, if you can recall from the previous slides, it was having the abductor hallucis, the flexor digitorum brevis, and abductor digitorum. So these 3 muscles you need to know, identify in the cadaver image, on the cadaver part. And then we have the lumbricals which are visible here, the lateral plantar nerve, which I already mentioned was, and then we have the lateral plantar artery, then we have the medial plantar nerve and the flexor hallucis longus tendon. Now moving on deeper further to the second layer. So here we can see the flexor hallucis longus tendon, and then flexor digitorum longus, and then we can see the flexor digitorum accessorius or the quadratus plantae. These 3 primarily, and then here we are not able to appreciate clearly the lumbricals, so I have not marked them to not create this problem, and because already so many labels were there. And we can see the lateral plantar nerve, the lateral plantar artery, then the introitiae, we can just see this, and then fibrous sheaths, flexors, abductor digiti minimi, the flexor digitorum brevis, the cut part, and the abductor hallucis. You need to have an orientation which muscles are going towards the medial side, which are lateral side, so that you know you don't have to mug. Then moving on to the deeper dissection, to the third layer, we have the flexor hallucis brevis and the flexor digiti minimi, which is also known as the flexor digiti minimi brevis. And then we have the adductor hallucis with its 2 heads, the oblique head and the transverse head, this oblique head and the transverse head. This is easily identifiable on the real cadaver. In the previous batches, we could easily show, but now due to COVID-19 situation, we are not able to do a real-time dissection. So this is the flexor digitorum brevis cut. Now something little bit about the lateral plantar artery, which was in the plantar arches, which forms the artery, and which is completed by the dorsalis peris artery, which we already discussed. This is the image from the prosected part from the department. Not much structures I could label them in this diagram, because it would be not so much accurate in the labels. So what you can easily see from this view is the flexor digitorum brevis and the flexor hallucis longus. Just a quick recap: the sole, the layer 1, abductor hallucis, flexor digitorum brevis. I am showing all these images simultaneously. If you can correlate better with the cadaver or the 3D models, it's up to you. Then flexor digitorum brevis and the adductor abductor digita minima. If we move on to the second layer, you can see this is highlighted. We move on to the second layer. You can see the lumbricals, which we could not appreciate in that previous image, cadaveric image. The first lumbrical, second lumbrical, third lumbrical, and the fourth. Then we have the quadratus plantae, which was also known as the flexor digitorum accessory. And in the flexor digitorum longus tendon, flexor hallucis longus tendon. Moving on to the layer number 3, we have the flexor hallucis brevis, the adductor hallucis with its transverse head and the oblique, the flexor digiti minimi brevis. Then we have the fourth layer, the interossei muscles. You can see the plantar interossei and the dorsal interossei.